Hi Des. Thanks for this interview today in Hull Road Park at York. It's a beautiful summer's day.
Yes, fine. A nice place to have setting to have an interview. The park is very underused these days. All the parks are hardly used. It's a shame because there's some really nice things here. Maybe the council could put more play things in for kids to play with. But this is a nice day. I thought we'd just have the interview outside.
Yeah, it's great. Lovely setting as well.
It is nice. Yeah.
Yes. What kinds of comedies have you done?
Mainly these days, I tend to do comedies regarding pantomimes. I've done pantomimes with Cinderella, and because I've got an Irish sense of humour, I tend to play around a bit. I could do Jack and the Beanstalk, or Jack and the Beanstalk meets Cinderella. All kinds of comedies with silly kind of ideas, and they're the kind of comedies I like to do.
That's great, yeah. And have you had any success with these scripts?
Sadly no, because the BBC are probably the only people that actually do these competitions, and about 2,000 people actually enter the competition, and 90% would get rejected anyway because it's total rubbish, which we can understand because not everyone can write comedy. And I would get an email saying, sorry, you weren't successful, we need to concentrate on people who've got show more talent, which was a very under-meaning thing to say. And then to find out that another competition winner went on to write Boy Meets Girl, which I didn't think was funny, and I don't think even the member of the public even thought it was funny.
Yeah. And why didn't you think it was funny then, Des?
Well, first of all, the concept wasn't very good. A boy meeting a woman twice his age who happens to be a transvestite, and she's not exactly a model, top model kind of thing. It just seems crazy. The actual comedy ideas. Well, there was a comedy idea where the mother-in-law comes in. She's the mother of the transvestite, and they're coming for an evening meal, and they can't find any food to give her for a nice meal, and they end up giving her beans on toast, and that's like the punchline of a half-hour comedy, which wasn't really good. So no, I didn't think it was funny at all.
So,
no.
And did you think there was any chemistry between the central characters, or?
No, there was no indication. If the BBC hadn't pointed out that these people, these two were in a relationship, you wouldn't know. There was no holding hands, no kissing, cuddling, staring into each other's eyes. There was no kind of chemistry whatsoever to actually show that these two were an item. No.
And did you think it was sensationalism?
Yeah. I think what the BBC are trying to do in order to get the viewing figures up is they're looking for comedies which are outrageous and sensationalism, and probably chucking the baby out with the bathwater by coming out with something that's not even funny, like Boy Meets Girl, and that's throwing a transvestite. And you can have comedies with gays, lesbians and transvestites, but if you're going to do something like this, it has to be funny. And I got the impression that the people in the penthouse suite upstairs with their brandy glasses were screaming and shouting, saying we need decent good comedy, and the people on the ground floor were saying we need to actually get good things in there, but they're going off the rails and they're actually picking up things which aren't funny, but it's got sensationalism. And I'm thinking now that the BBC in the penthouse, they're thinking that the public just can't write decent good comedy, and the disillusion that they are, but most of the good stuff is getting chucked out. And basically that's how it is. So you need to work on these things, and not everyone can actually write a good comedy. For example, footballers. When you're a child, and I've known lots of children when I was at school, all the boys wanted to be footballers, first division footballers it was then, and all the girls wanted to sing like Lulu and Sandy Shaw, but they never made it. So not only everyone can write a comedy, and I've done comedies on my website which I can prove that some of the comedies I've written are far better than Boy Meets Girl as well.
Yeah. And so how would you have done it?
Well, I wouldn't have had a woman twice his age, because there were a lot of transvestites more nearer his age. Like you see on TV, your documentaries about even children having sex changes. And if you're having it as a school, you know, that's not going to be easy. You know, you're going to have to you might be bullied. You know, all kinds of things happen. So they might have a sense of humour. So I reckon there's an awful lot of people nearer to his age that could have been a transvestite, and a boy meets girl of his own age. And that's how I would have done it.
Yeah.
And I would probably I'd have probably introduced a gay and a lesbian as well, just for extra comedy.
Yeah. And what do you think makes good comedy?
A good character. Now you can't just say pick a character out of the air and say these characters are going to be in the comedy. You've got to say how old the characters are, the nature of the characters, the likes, the dislikes. You know, it's a bit like Coronation Street. When a new person comes on, new character is formed, they will have all the paperwork about the character, who the character is, how old the character is, whether tall, short, fat, thin, the kind of person they are, and would they get on with another character. So the character is no longer a character, it's actually a real living person. And they can go even further, because if you're going to do a comedy, you're going to need an actor. Now another problem with this is that you've got to have an actor who will work with the character. Now an idea of what I would see in this is that if John Sullivan hadn't had David Jason playing Del Boy in Only Fools and Horses, and he'd gone for someone like John Cleese, who's a lot taller, which would, as Nicholas Lyndhurst is taller, I can't see John Cleese turning around to Nicholas Lyndhurst and saying, "Rodney, you plonker," because you know. So you've got to write for the actor as well as the character they play, and that's what you need to do. And also the type of comedy you write. One of the comedy's ideas would be like the wheels fall off. The wheels fall off. And back in the 60s, there used to be this song called "Three Wheels on My Wagon," where this guy's been chased with his wife on a horse and cart with Indians, and then a second wheel falls, a third wheel falls off, and you know the wheel's falling off. And a situation like that would be you have a husband and wife who are middle-aged and living in this nice suburban place, and a young couple move in next door, and a lovely little pretty girl she is, and now the old guy next door fancies her, and you can see there's going to be a little bit of something going on here, and now you've got an idea. So that's one type of comedy. Another type of comedy would be a misunderstanding approach. Now one of the misunderstandings was that Rising Damp had this comedy episode where Rigsby goes on holiday to Spain. He's a bit xenophobic, he doesn't like foreigners, and within about several days of him being there, he's deported. He comes home early. Alan, who's there, thinks he's going to be away for 2 weeks, and an old favourite person of Rigsby, Ruth, comes back, and he gets a room back to Ruth. And then there's a young girl with a baby, and she's got a husband who's on a ferry, probably the Isle of Man ferry, something like that. And because it's only going to be for 2 weeks, she can come in. But Rigsby comes home early, and what happens now is Alan's upstairs in his flat with the baby. So Rigsby's, "What's the baby doing?" You know, and Alan says, "It's not mine. It's not my baby. It's not mine." And he says, "I can't have a baby. I can't have a baby. The baby's got to go." So later on, he turns around to Rigsby and says, "The baby's gone now. It's back with the mother." Now the mother there has to go out, and she goes round to Ruth next door and said, "Can you look after my baby, because I've not got to nip out for a bit." So now Rigsby goes into the room, sees Ruth. "Oh, Ruth, glad to see you back, glad to see you back." Then he sees the baby. So now he thinks that in his absence, or her absence, because she'd been gone for some time, now that she's had a baby. Oops. And then he says, "Who's the father?" "I don't know who the father is." Because it's not her baby, it's the woman next door, and her husband's on a ferry. You don't even know so you can see how the misunderstanding can develop into comedy as well. And they're the two kind of areas that I would use for comedy.
I mean that's a classic episode, isn't
it? Yeah, they are.
And what writers do you admire?
Well, there's quite a lot actually, because I grew up with Morecambe and Wise for start off, and they did their own scripts. Then we had Rising Damp, and Rising Damp was Eric Chappell, who's still alive, and I would love to meet Eric Chappell, because I bet he can tell you a few stories. He must be nearly 80 now, but he'd be a good person to talk to. And then we had David Croft, who wrote Dad's Army, Hello Hello, Are You Being Served, Heidi High, and It Ain't Half Hot Mum.
All gems, are they? Yeah.
I didn't get on with the Ain't Half Hot Mum because it wasn't an army person.
Yeah.
And then you also had John Sullivan with Only Fools and Horses. And then you've got tons of other comedies there, even American ones like Third Rock from the Sun, and that's got to be a really good comedy. So these are kind of things I grew up with.
That's it, yeah. And do you think, how do you think things could improve with situation comedies?
Well, I think that the way things are happening now is there's only the BBC actually scouting for these people, and they're obviously not doing a decent job. They're probably getting people that brought in temps to look at the comedy, and I've been unemployed, so I do know how the government want to try and get youth people into these companies. Maybe the BBC have done this, and the comedies that they're not looking up the comedies, pick good comedies. But if it was opened up to, for example, to ITV, Channel 4 and various other networks, and they did their own scouting, now the BBC would have to look more properly at proper good comedies. They really would, yeah.
Yeah. So they need to seek out new writers, basically.
And the other thing is like you got divisions within the BBC. You got the penthouse suite on the 25th floor, and they're all there with the brandies, and they're screaming and shouting, saying, "We must get decent comedy." There's not just decent comedy script writers, so they have a screaming row with the people down on the ground. They bring in these temps to judge it, and basically they're looking for sensationalism. They're not looking for anything proper comedy, which they're not getting. And the people in the penthouse suite, well, they're missing. They're thinking that people out there just can't write, and they can't be so wrong. They can do it.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about the comedies you have written?
Well, I tend to go, because I'm Irish, I tend to go off the rails with the comedy, try and make it a funny and off thing. For example, I've done a pantomime where I've got a bit of Jack and the Beanstalk meets Cinderella, all that kind of stuff. And I was at a church, and we'd want to do little pantomimes to introduce people to the church, and pantomimes. To go out to a pantomime, you look at £50 per person. If you're a wife and husband and wife with children, that's a fortune. So what we want to do is to bring people into the church. It didn't cost them anything, but if you want to put money into a charity for children, then that would work. And they want to do what's flavour of the month of Christmas. On one occasion, it was the Great British Bake Off. So I sat there one night and I thought, well, I'll write 2 or 3 scenes about the Great British Bake Off and Cinderella. Cinderella is such hard work that the fairy godmother has gone off with a headache. She had a headache. So it's a fairy godmother that becomes a fairy godfather, and now it's John Cleese with a bowler hat and a pinstripe and an umbrella, and he's all official and everything. So you've really got a very unusual situation there, and he has to help her out for every time there's a problem. There's another problem, and the biggest problem of all is Cinderella can't cook, and in order to win the hand of the princess, she has got to bake a cake for the prince. So you can't get more ludicrous than that.
Yeah.
And then a year later, I found out from IMDb that Christmas 2015, Star Wars was going to be the thing that's going. Yeah. So I thought, well, let's do a comedy about Star Wars. So I did write Star Wars the pantomime, and I wrote 3 good comedy sketches, scenes for Star Wars the pantomime. And then there was another case more recently. There was a script factor in York where 5 people every 2 months would actually join this competition, and out of these 5, 1 would be a winner, and then at the end of these 5 2-month things, they would go on to a final. And the script factor in this case had to be called the Bechdel test, which meant it had to be feminine content.
Yeah.
And what it really meant was a woman having a chat with a woman about women issues or things, so it's a woman on woman kind of thing. But I misinterpreted to think that it had to be something where it's a comedy all about women, like the very original Birds of a Feather. The first version of Birds of a Feather was just women, there was no men in it, now there is in it. Yeah. And I thought it should be that, so I decided to write a comedy based on an all-girls football team.
Yeah.
And I did this for the competition, and yeah, it was, as a bloke, to write a comedy about women, it was pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great, yeah. And can you give us an example of your work?
Well, I brought one here. There's lots of jokes about women, and women not understanding the offside rule. And not to upset any women, obviously, part of this comedy for the girls' football team is there's 4 girls on a bench. You got on one end, you got the manager of the football team. In the middle, you got 2 of our best players, and on the end, you got a young girl called Daphne, which has the implication that she's not very intelligent. And Daphne is not a footballer, but she just comes along to as part of the friends. So what happens is that there's been lots of these kinds of jokes about how can we feminise the offside rule that women would understand, and I came up with this one. So Daphne, what is the offside rule? You're joking. The offside rule stipulates that there must be at least 2 members of the opposing team in front of you when you gain or are about to gain possession of the ball. What do you mean about gaining possession of the ball? Do you remember back in January when you went to the sales and you were looking for a new handbag? Well, yeah. Well, think of it this way. Supposing you waited outside the shop with Claire, and there were lots of girls waiting outside for the shop to open, okay? The doors open and all of you rush in to get the handbag that is on sale and is behind the counter. It's the only one left. Okay. Now suppose that you beat all the other girls to the front of the shop, you're at the counter and you ask to buy the handbag. Okay. Okay, imagine that when you tried to buy the handbag, you discover that you had left your purse at home that morning. But I never leave my purse at home. I always come out with my purse. Never mind that. Just suppose that you did. You looked over your shoulder to the back of the shop and you see Claire and you shout to Claire, "Claire, I forgot my purse." Okay. Claire goes into her handbag and she pulls out the purse. She then throws her purse over the heads of all the other girls in the shop and you catch the purse. Okay. You turn to the shop assistant to buy the handbag. Okay, well in football terms that would be considered offside. I understand. It's a bit like standing next to the goal and waiting for someone to kick the ball toward you just so you can tap it into the goal. Exactly. And that's the offside rule for women.
That's brilliant. Thanks for talking to us. That's fantastic. Yeah.
Well, hope we meet again.
That's great. Yeah.
Thank you
Thanks
very
very
much.
much, Des. Cheers. Cheers. All the best.
Bye.